Poor fertility is one of the main reasons for culling a cow in dairy herds around the world. More than 20% of all cullings are related to poor fertility and reproductional issues. It's stressful and frustrating struggling with poor fertility, and it has a huge long-term impact on the production and longevity of your dairy herd and ultimately your profit. To help give us the best tips on how to overcome poor fertility in your herd, I've invited two experts on Holstein and Jersey cows to join me in the studio. Claus Langdahl, Senior Breeding Manager for VikingHolstein, and Peter Larson, Senior Breeding Manager for VikingJersey. They have 20 and 30 years of experience advising on reproduction in dairy herds. We'll look at the challenges and the solutions for better fertility and reproduction, followed by a sneak peek into the latest genetic technologies in innovative cattle breeding. This is your BreedCast, produced by VikingGenetics. I'm your host, Louise Rønn Svane. So, hello and welcome to the studio, Claus and Peter.
Thank you.
Very nice to have you with us today. So, Claus, we'll start with you. You work with Holstein farmers around the world. Mm-hmm. What are the main reasons for poor fertility and reproduction issues that they come to you about?
What we see in the Holstein breed in general is that it's a breed that has been for several decades been heavily selected for high production. It's been a main focus for many years, and that's also where we are. It is an extremely high producing cow that we have in the barns today, but along with this high production came also some unfavorable relations to fertility, to health traits. In this case, poor fertility coming, you could say, from having prioritized production way too high. So I think that's the main issue that I hear from farmers saying that, well, the cows, they milk enough. The issue is actually get them pregnant, get them bred back so they're ready for another lactation.
And what can poor fertility and reproductional issues, what can that result in for the farmer?
Well, it has a huge impact on everyday life on the farm. There is, there are of course always the frustration having to work a lot with actually getting the cows bred back. There's a lot of work related to that. You need to observe. You need to register a lot of things. That's, you would say, directly in part of that. Of course, there are also costs directly related to it, that you have to buy more semen. You have maybe to have some treatments on your animals in order to make them ready for the next pregnancy. And also, you say you can, with a poor fertility, it can be tough on your whole system, because you can lack animals to replace. So you will have to let cows stay longer in the herd than they actually should. And so you say there's a whole complex of issues that arise if you deal with reproduction problems. Mm.
Peter, you've traveled the world for the past 30 years, working with Jersey farmers around the world, advising them, etc. What are some of the challenges, the typical challenges you see around fertility and reproduction?
Well, I see some of the same challenges as the ones that Claus has mentioned, but for jerseys, maybe a less effect of high production on fertility as in the Holstein breed. It's known for the very high production of milk, the high volumes. But still, it is one of the major culling regions, and the second largest for the Jersey breed, next to production. And for that reason, it is very important that we focus on this, because we don't want the farmers to face involuntary culling. We want them to make the decisions themselves on what animals do I want to cull, because I have better, younger animals that I'd rather focus on and breed with. So involuntary culling is certainly not what breeders want, and that's something that some farmers around the world face because of poor fertility.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the challenges around? I know there's something around timing and the insemination as well with regards to fertility.
Yes, and it is something that we focus on quite a lot because earlier we said that a cow should give birth to a calf once a year. And now some farmers prolong the lactation to make better profits, have a longer and higher milk production. So the ideal or optimal time to breed a cow is not necessarily as it was earlier, and it can differ from management to management conditions. So whether you are producing under subtropical or tropical conditions or here in the Nordic countries could actually also affect the decisions on when to breed the cow.
What is the ultimate consequence of sort of poor fertility and reproductional issues in herds, Claus?
I just wanted to add an extra element to put extra value to why this is important. If you look at the culling reasons for the Holsteins, you will have that it's more than 20%, 22% actually in our condition here in the Nordic countries. That is the reason. If you ask the farmer why he cull his cows. So it's like Peter says, in Jersey it's an issue, in Holstein it's an issue. So I think it is an overall issue on our condition, but definitely worldwide also. So it's present all over.
So culling is actually one of the ultimate consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that poor fertility, it sounds like it's also a combination between genetics, management, environment, all these different priorities, so to speak, that we have in a herd. Let's try and look at ways to overcome these challenges, because I know those are the solutions that you work with. Peter, when a Jersey farmer comes to you and says he's struggling with fertility and reproduction in his herd, what are some of the first things that you recommend that he takes a look at?
Well, first of all, he needs to take a look at the genetics in his herd and also what genetics he has been using over the last period or last years affecting the current herd. But of course, he also needs to take the current conditions into consideration. Are the bulls that I use, are the genetic level that I work with, is it affected by environmental factors or other conditions coming from outside? But the genetics is definitely very, very important. And we've seen some of the populations has actually had a negative genetic trend over the last years. We try to include both the female fertility and other traits of economic importance, especially production, into our overall breeding value NTM. And the NTM includes all and tries to balance out the involved traits so that you get progress for all of them. So in that way, we've managed, even we have a good progress for production, also to have a positive trend for fertility.
Claus, what's it like with Holstein? What if I came to you as a Holstein farmer saying, I'm struggling with this, and I know poor fertility is one of the biggest pains for Holstein farmers. Where would you start? What would you look at?
I will, first of all, I would, as Peter said, I'll put some focus on the genetic. So that's the foundation of everything you work with in your herd. It needs to be optimized as much as possible in this. But again, also knowing that this is a complex where management, the environment, whatever we offer these animals, and in every day, that's of course affecting this a lot. But actually, the genetic part is very important in this, and I think what we see is that there is a good response to this balanced breeding, as Peter is also mentioning. Say to keep, of course, focusing on high production, because that's where the farmer makes his income. He needs income for his herd, but definitely to cut down the costs also, for example, via a better reproduction in that. So not to be too fixed on one way of breeding, but keeping this overall view and the balance in the animals, so they can last this high production for a long time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What are some of the examples you've seen either on the home market or out in the world where you visited other farms as well, of a farmer, really turning a business around by focusing on health, fertility, and production?
I think the Nordic farmers they have realized the need to have these indexes in focus when they do the selection, and they can say, even though it's a relatively small part of what you experience on the animals, that is actually the genetics, but you can easily see that there are some nice trends in the way the animals they react. The genetic trends in them. We have had a nice genetic progress in production, but also, realized kilos of milk from the cows. They are producing a lot. They are hardworking animals in this. But at the same time, we have also experienced that they have become more healthy and they have become more fertile. And that's, I think, a perfect example of balancing this out as it is. For example, we've seen, if you look at one of the very important traits in the fertility concept, the time from you start inseminate until she is actually pregnant or bred back, you have reduced that with about 6 days on cows during the last 7-8 years, which is a tremendous change actually for a trait as low heritable as fertility is. Mm-hmm. So there's you can easily detect this genetic progress in the herd when you go there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a comment to what Claus mentions about the insemination period from when you make the decision until the cow is pregnant. That's one of the sub-indices, because we have our overall female fertility index, but underlying are several sub-indices, and some of them are extremely important, and especially this with the insemination period. But there are also number of inseminations and days from calving to first insemination. So there is a group of underlying sub-indices that you can also make use of.
And now you're mentioning the indexes. How is the data actually gathered in the Nordic countries that sort of gives a farmer options to looking into, how to select the genetics?
Oh, the data is collected from several sources, especially from the AI technicians, where AI technicians do all the records in connection with the breeding of the animals and also in pregnancy checks. Then we do some registrations, and veterinarians, of course, do as well when we have diseases in relation to reproduction. So several sources and a good tradition for it. So we obtain nearly all the data that's possible, and have been doing that for more than 40 years. So our database is extremely huge and enables us to make these both overall indices and also sub-indices on fertility.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So Claus, how do I select the right genetics to boost the fertility in my Holstein herd or on any herd I may have?
Yeah, I think your main approach is to look at whatever kind the ranking bulls are, you could say, are in your area. Here in our area we have the NTM, which is an overall economic trait, and you will find similar total merit indexes around the world. But the NTM that we believe in here, there we have fertility in with a relatively high weight. And so it's, you could say, picking animals from high-ranking NTMs will often automatically point you in the direction of some good fertility bulls. You can then, of course, decide that you want to go even further and on your own farm make a strategy saying, I prefer to put extra value on this trait because this is an issue for me. I can do with less production maybe, and then I can prioritize fertility even higher and pick from, you could say, optimize that trait even more. So you could say start out with the high-ranking bulls NTM-wise and pick among those the profile that you prefer for fertility. That will be the optimal way to get the best genetic for your herd.
Mm-hmm. Peter, what's it like around the world in other countries? How is fertility sort of prioritized and valued around the world?
The fertility is valued very high, and that's no matter where you go in the world. And when you visit Jersey breeders, not all are having the same tools as what we have, and as Claus mentioned with the Holstein breed. The Holstein breed is huge, and I think in nearly all populations around the world, you have breeding values to work with. That's not the case for Jerseys. In small Jersey populations, not all have breeding values on the females. An example is that Norway and France didn't have until they joined us last year. So you could, of course, pick and choose bulls. If you had an impression that this cow family is very infertile, then focus on bulls that are very fertile, are breeding good female fertility. But if you do not have breeding values on your animals, you are really struggling to solve those problems that you have or the challenges that you have. So, of course, you can genomic test your animals, test in our system, for instance, but otherwise, at least use bulls that are highly ranked for female fertility. Mm-hmm. And be very specific in what type of bulls you use. Use from those populations having the positive trends and that have the highest international rankings for female fertility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Claus, if you were to summarize what are some natural steps for me to take to get well on the way of better fertility and better reproduction in my herd?
Yeah, then as a farmer you should be sure that you with open eyes know what you're doing. Make yourself a strategy for your herd. Just like everything else you do on your farm, you need to have a good plan, and you need to follow that plan. And that strategy will definitely differ from farm to farm, but some of it will of course also be the same. But make sure that you prioritize what is needed for your system. It might also be that it's health traits that you also put extra weight on. It can also be on solids in milk or whatever. But I'm sure in every case there will be a value of keep focusing on improving the fertility in this. But make this strategy and follow it. I think that's a critical thing in this. I think most farmers agree what they prefer, what kind of cows they like. An easygoing cow that produces a lot of milk that stays healthy. I think that's the kind of cow farmers like to work with. But there are different ways to get to that. So of course also look at where you source your genetics. That there is a focus of high valuable genetics when it comes to the health and fertility concepts.
So we've looked at some of the challenges around poor fertility and also the solutions. Now I think it'd be fun to take a look ahead. Peter, when you look into the future, what does the future genetics look like, and how will that impact fertility and reproduction?
Well, I think we will at least will keep the current pace or genetic trend for female fertility. Keep focusing on having very, very good female fertility. But I think we will in near future add a male fertility so that you can focus on both when you optimize your reproductive results in your herd. Male fertility is a matter of what bulls are giving the best fertility result, what semen is giving you the best fertility result in your herd. A way of doing this is, or to developing this is to introduce batch coding, and we have done that. That means that we can follow the semen from when it's produced, from what's happening in the barn, the day the bull produces the semen, what's happening to the semen in the lab, what's happening after the lab when it goes to AI technician and into the cow in the herd. So we can trace everything back, and we can optimize on all the procedures from the barn through the lab, through what's happening out there when AI technicians or farmers themselves are doing the insemination. In that way, we can optimize on the male fertility, but we can also optimize female fertility. But male fertility and the quality of semen will be affected by this.
And I think just as an addition to this, that it's, say, the speed we have today in the breeding program with genomic bulls and having a huge replacement of new genetics coming in all the time, there we will actually see a natural selection for better semen quality. Because if a bull is not good in semen quality, then there will be other ones taking over from him quite soon. So there's a natural selection, kind of a natural selection in the semen quality as well in the system we run today, which will of course also benefit on farm level.
Mm-hmm. Now that we're talking fertility and reproduction, there's quite a bit of buzz around sexed semen, which will actually be a topic for our next BreedCast. How can, just briefly, Claus, how can sexed semen be an additional tool to consider when breeding for better fertility and reproduction?
Yeah, that's a really interesting change we see these years, moving fast towards more use of sex semen on dairy animals. And it has a logical reason for this big change, because it opens up a lot of opportunities on farm level to do decisions to optimize your herd in a much better way. But I think it's relevant, I would say, in this topic that we talk about here to underline that, say, you can do a lot of things, but you are almost always depending on a good reproduction. Say if you do not get your animals bred back, then you are in trouble. Say so. Everything from there on can be improved, but you need to have that as a focus. Fertility in your animals, so you can get them into production. You can have them replaced in the right speed and so on. I think that's crucial in this. But that's also what we see. We see a lot of skilled farmers in this. They are very good. There's a lot of techniques also connected to it these days to help support the farmers in the management. And we also see good trends genetically. So say we are moving the breeds in the right direction, and you could say it's ready to take the next step to use these newer tools with sex semen in a more efficient way.
Mm-hmm. Peter, any sort of closing thoughts from your end?
No, but it makes good sense to focus on male fertility, on the batch coding. When working with sex semen, it's even more important to try and optimize all procedures so that we are getting the same results as what we are getting with conventional semen, and so that we can be sure that our sexed products will make just as good results as our conventional products. Mm. We are getting closer and closer, and I think we will be there shortly.
Wonderful. And to learn more about sex semen, that is actually the next episode in our BreedCast. So much more to learn on that topic. Thank you so much. That's all we had for our BreedCast today. We have looked at how to overcome poor fertility in dairy herds, and we, thanks to you, have discussed some of the new technologies available and coming on the horizon. If you'd like to learn more, do visit our reproduction best practices area at VikingGenetics.com, and you'll find that under the management tips menu. I want to thank you, Claus Langdahl and Peter Larson, very much for sharing your insights with us. And thank you everyone out there for listening. If you have an idea for a topic in cattle breeding you'd like us to focus on in a future BreedCast, please reach out via the VikingGenetics website or send us a message on our fast-growing Facebook page, VikingGenetics. My name is Louise Rønn Svane. Please join me for the next BreedCast on how sex semen can make your dairy business even more profitable and sustainable.